afternoon, dear students. In this video session, I welcome you all. I am Dr. Chethan, Assistant Professor in Zoology. In this video session, we will discuss about Charles Darwin and his ideas of natural selection in connection with your second semester syllabus. So, to brief about Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin was an English naturalist born in the 12th February 1809 in the Scotland. From his school days, he was a passion towards natural sciences. He was collecting more amount of the flowers, feathers as well as the insects. Father Robert was a physician who imposed Darwin to join a medical career in the University of Edinburgh. The medical profession was distasteful to Darwin and he discontinued this medical profession because of the lack of and support as well as the hands-on experiences. He decided to continue his profession in the Christ College for his graduation. University of Cambridge, where he started to continue his graduation, where he took up a biology as well as geology and also theology for his investigations of the natural history. Two of his professors, J.S. Enslow and Adam Sedgwick, supported Darwin in his graduation and also supported him for his investigations in the natural sciences. In 1831, J.S. Enslow wrote to a Darwin an expenditure to a British Navy as a naturalist. Darwin accepted the letter given by Enslow and he decided to join a British Navy in a ship called as HMS Beagle. The ship Beagle departed from the Devonport, has visited the various areas like South Africa, Australia, Atlantic Oceans and very importantly the Galapagos Islands. The Galapagos Islands is a long time separated from the main islands which are in 16 different islands that are subdivided themselves with the 600 miles far off. This Galapagos Islands is also called as the laboratory of evolution. Darwin collected various specimens during his voyage and he recorded each and everything in his diary. Darwin surprisingly saw the stratifications of the rocks, of the volcanic rocks, which were placed from one after the another, just like what he has read in his diary. Darwin has mentioned that giant tortoises that are found in the different islets of the Galapagos were so different that we can easily make out and identify from which island these tortoises have arrived from. Galapagos Islands are also having several important animals like iguanas as well as the coral reefs and also the presence of the armadillos. Charles Darwin, without his knowledge, collected numerous number of specimens during his voyage during the 1831 to 1836, and this collection of numerous of specimens were observed in the backyard of his down house and careful investigations and given out a number of theories. The evolutionary idea that was proposed by Darwin is called as Darwinism or Darwinian theory. The Darwinism can be explained by 5 important principles. The first principle is the overproduction, the second principle is the struggle for existence, the third principle is the variation, the fourth principle is the survival of the fittest and natural selection, and the fifth principle is the origin of new species. Let us take up the first principle, the overproduction or prodigalities of the nature. It is the capacity of every living organisms to reproduce rapidly. Darwin stated that if a favorable environment is provided with the food as well as shelter, every organism reproduces in a larger number. This, for example, Darwin has given and emphasized that if a slow breeding elephant is matured at 30 years and they started breeding for another 100 years, then for their children will reproduce again, continue to breed, and there will be 19 millions of elephants in the forest. Similarly, and among the invertebrates, an oyster produces 16,000 eggs in one spawn. So all of these 16,000 eggs will hatch off and their children started producing the number of eggs. Then the ship has to sail the whole ocean area and that covers the complete volume of the ocean. See, not only in animals but also in case of plants, the amaranthus cones that produces the millions of seeds that disperses in a given area. If all of their seeds are sprouted and they disperses their seeds, then it covers the whole volume of the area of the earth. The theory of the what is called as overproductions has been accepted by the Malthusian principle by the Darwin, that stating that every organisms reproduce in a geographic increase in their size, but their number always remains constant. So this constant which Malthus called as the due to the checkpoints. The combined idea of the valleys as well as the Darwin has called these checkpoints as the struggle for existence. The second principle is the struggle for existence. Due to overproduction, the progenies that come out of these populations have to struggle for food, shelter as well as the mate. This type of struggle is called as the competition. The competition is the source of every progress. When the competition is broadly recognized in nature with three important types. The intraspecific competition is a struggle that occurs between the same type of organisms, whereas interspecific competition is a struggle that occurs between the different kinds of organisms, whereas environmental struggle is the organisms that come across with a physical environment. So let us intraspecific competitions that we often see in the nature with where the tree sheds millions of seeds. When all of these seeds are fled into sprouting, only few of the seeds will sprout just because there is enough moisture and also the availability of water as well as sunlight which they grow up, whereas the rest of the seeds are not able to sprout. Similarly, in case of animals also, there is a competition for mate between the two different mates. Interspecific competition is a type of struggle that occurs between the two different organisms for the food as well as the mate. So it is often seen in the wild animals where the tiger is hunting the deer and also an eagle hunting the rat as well as the snakes. The bison is hunted or eliminated completely, eaten up by lions. So this type of competition is also seen among the nature. Environmental struggle is the one very important competitions that are faced by the human mankind. The environmental challenges like the droughts, earthquakes and volcanoes that are to tsunamis which are being exposed by the living organisms are always formed with a certain types of variations, and it takes off many lives of the human mankind. Due to consequences of all these important three types of competitions, the human or the living organisms will develop a certain types of variation to overcome this struggle or competitions, and the individual or the organisms that come out of the certain variations which survive are called as the fittest. So overproduction which leads to struggle. The struggle may occur at any stages of the life cycle. the organisms develop a certain type of variations to overcome the competition. The next principle is the variations. Variations are the differences that we see among the plants as well as the animals. These variations are very essential factors in the progress of evolutions. The variations which are brought about in the nature is astonishing changes that we can observe from one individual to the another individuals. Darwin recognizes two important types of variation. One is the favorable variation and the another one is the unfavorable variations. The favorable variations are the beneficial variations or the continuous variations which are advantageous to the organisms for its survival, and they are transmitted to the offsprings or the children. Whereas the unfavorable variations are harmful to the organisms and they are eliminated or perished. Darwin was more important in identifying the favorable variations that are advantageous to the organisms which are required to survive to the particular environment. The variations are the raw materials of evolutions, and the variations which are brought about by the mutations and recombinations are transmitted through the new generations through a process of hereditary. So these variations which also helps the organisms to survive in a particular environment. For example, in a pocket kangaroo mice where its coat color is light brown in coloration is easily identified by the eagles and they are easily caught in the desert area. With the development of the dark coat colorations of these pocket mice, they can camouflage the background of the mud and that eagles cannot find them easily over for as a food. So the variations in the coloration has brought up the survival ability of the living organisms. These variations are the very essential component, the progress of an evolution. Darwin emphasized that in the struggle for existence, the individuals build up a type of variations. These variations are very essential for the organisms for survival, which he called as adaptive variations. Darwin emphasized that during the struggle, individual organisms that develops with certain variations are survived and they are the fittest. These small amount of variations are get accumulated over the generations and generations, and they are these variations which are beneficial to the organisms are selected by the natural selection. Natural selection is an evolutionary force which affects that beneficial characters to the organisms are intensified and modified, while the harmful characters are eliminated by the natural selection. The organisms which have neither the benefit or the harmful characters are carried through the natural selection in the form of the vestigial organs. The vestigial organs like the wisdom teeth, nictitating membrane, the ear pinna are one of the very good examples that are being carried by the human body. There are hundreds of vestigial organs within our human body. So, natural selection acting upon the small advantageous variations is an important progress in the form of an evolution. The natural selection which was selected these smaller beneficial variations are subjected into the modifications. The modifications of these variations are always towards the fitness, towards the adaptations, towards the forms and functions of the body. Thus, survival of the fittest is through a natural selection, and natural selection always promotes the adaptations of the living organisms, the modifications of its body, and also the modifications of its various organs which are suitable, adapted to the particular environment is called as an adaptation. Darwin quoted that it is not the stronger of the species that survives, not the intelligent that survives, but it is the most adapted to the changes as survived. Natural selection always selects the fittest, and the fittest enjoys the suitable environment with the beneficial characters than the non-fittest. Fifth principle of Darwin is the origin of new species. Darwin emphasized that if the same persistent conditions are continued, then the organisms develops a certain types of variations and beneficial variations or get accumulated and transferred to the new generations. And this beneficial variations which subjected to the modifications for the organisms to the particular environment which are suitable for individual organism, and they are propagated and also they are selected by natural selection. The smaller variations which are beneficial to the organisms are developed by the organisms or adapted to the particular environment. Due to the cumulative accumulations of all these variations from generations to generations, and the new individuals which are brought from that particular parents differ from their ancestors, and they appear different from their parents. The organisms which are born from such a parents always appear different from its ancestors, and they appear like a new species, and this is the essence for origin of a new species. This formation of a new species is called as speciation. Darwin explained this formation of species or an origin of species by taking an finches that he has collected and in a Galapagos Islands. The Galapagos Islands are the region that Darwin has visited during his voyage as having 6 different islands that having a dominant of the finches. To his surprise, each finches of the islands are different from one island to the another island. The finches which are different in their beak shapes. So, the vegetative finches will have a very strong beak for cutting the seeds. The insectivorous finches have a long slender beaks for picking the insects, while the cactorious finches which are having a blunt beak for pulp cactus of the pulp region. Similarly, the woodpecker finches is also having an cutter-like beaks which helps them to cut the wood and to pick the insects. Darwin, to his surprise, explained that these type of finches might have evolved in long time from the main islands to a different islands where they adapted themselves to a particular environment. The spectacular ideas of the Darwin that the species adapt and diverse as no one ever thought during his time. Darwin explained thus, these finches for a long time have diverged from common ancestors. Due to their modifications of the beaks or mainly adaptations to the particular environment that they are going to reside. And this type of environment, that particular environment and the beneficial variations that are help the organisms to select themselves. He theorized that different finches have evolved from different islands. The finches might have evolved from common ancestors which have an adaptive radiations among them to form a new species. The species which were formed with the different modifications of the beak were mainly adapting to the particular environment. Darwin emphasized that the species adapt and change with the modifications of a certain organs. These adaptations that are found among the finches, he explained that during a very long time the finches might have isolated from the mainland, and these finches which are adapted to the particular regions, the finches which are adapted to different highlands have modified themselves and given rise to the new species. The formations of the new species is mainly through the adaptations and divergent from a common ancestors. The adaptive modifications of the Darwinian finches are thus different from one island to the another island. Darwin's concepts of natural selection was explained in his master book on the origin of species by natural selection written in 1859. 200 copies of his book was sold in a day and there were more demand for new editions. He mainly emphasized that process of natural selection in the origin of new species. Darwin also explained in one of his books the descent with modifications. He told that a human mankind have a close resemblance with the ape-like ancestors, and we share a lot of similar characters to chimpanzees. The human bodies, anatomical and morphological similarities as well as embryological similarities were same as that of chimpanzees. 99% of its DNA is also similar. Darwin stated that the human mankind has evolved from an ape-like ancestors, and also he described that we are the ancestral for a long time that have divided ourselves from an ape-like. Charles Darwin was asked to present his paper in the Linnean Societies of London on the theories of his natural selection. Many criticisms were started to impose questions against Darwinism. First critic was asked by the Linnean Society what is the causes of the variations. The Charles Darwin do not know about the causes of the variations, but the smaller variations that are caused by the living organisms were always non-heritable. Charles Darwin believed in the theory of pangenesis, where he describes that the pan genes which are determining the characters of the organs are transmitted from one through a gamete. The second critic to the Darwin imposed what? Through natural selection explained about the survival of the fittest, but not explained about the arrival of the fitter. The very interestingly, during the period of Darwinian time, the influence of Christianity will believe that the creator or the supernatural power like a god has created the human mankind similar to its images. So Darwinism was kept undiscovered for another 30 years until the rebirth of the neo-Darwinian theory with the evolutionary biologists like Huckles, Ernst Mayr, Weizmann and the Fishers and others. Fisher showed that the dominance of the useful genes over the less useful genes is through the natural selection. Hugo de Vries, with his mutational theory, explained that the variations which are brought about by the organisms, which are always different from one organism to their parents. The many of the incredible scientific perceptions of the Darwinian idea were similar to the experiments of the neo-Darwinism. Thus, the Darwin was called as the father of evolution. Not only for his ideas, but also the abundance of evidences that he has provided with the proof in his voyage that he has collected from the 5 years. Darwin was paved the way out to the truth of evolution. Darwin has undisclosed the mystery of evolution that has occurred during. He stood forefront further as to unravel the mystery of evolution. Over the 4.5 billion years ago, the formations of the earth, the tree of life has begun with a descendant of simple form to the complex forms. They are diverged from a common ancestry. All the species has diverted to it by a common ancestor which stems off with new species and subspecies. The variations which are selected in accumulations of variations which are transferred to the new generation, and selections of these beneficial variations are the main essence of evolution. Thus, evolution is a gradual change from one form to the another form. Dear students, in this video we have learned about the Darwinism and its principle, and I would like to conclude this video session by stating that nothing in biology makes sense except in light of evolution. Thank you one and all for watching this video.